Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I would like to, on behalf of CAUL and the CRIG and PD committees, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Australia and New Zealand where we live, learn, and work. We acknowledge and celebrate the inherent strengths of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and other First Nations peoples and communities, and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, sky, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'm joining you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Today, if you have any technical questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat and the CAUL team will assist you. We're using the hashtag CAULDOD when you're commenting on social media if you want to jump on board that. But welcome to the final webinar in the Joint Forum webinar series, our feature, Diversified or Diluted. If you have any questions for the debaters throughout the session, please ask them through the Slido link we've added to the chat, and you'll see them again as we progress. Now, we've never hosted a debate before, so if this crashes and burns, please hold me responsible. But if this debate really makes you think and you like what you hear, please thank our debate team members for the time and thoughts that they've put into this. So the CAUL Research and Information Group and Professional Development Interest Group hosts this joint forum. And to set the scene a little bit, I would argue that most people outside of the profession consider anyone who works in libraries to be librarians. However, as many of us know, library staff includes people like librarians, library technicians, graphic designers, data scientists, humans who have IT degrees, etc. Now, I might be falling into the same trap a little bit, but it seems to me like other professions don't have similar problems. For example, doctors are all doctors, we hope. Accountants are accountants, pilots are pilots. The name describes the job. But within libraries, and this is just my perception here, staff seem increasingly called on to do more and more, or that old refrain, we want you to do more with less. So just considering academic librarianship, staff have to do research-related activities, teaching-related activities, user experience testing, digital dexterity initiatives, just to name a few. So in light of these growing roles and responsibilities, are we likely to consider our profession more diverse, more diluted, more consolidated, or some combination of these and other qualities? So we're hoping to discuss the diversity of skills, capabilities, and education needed to be a librarian today and in the future. And I hope all of you saw that recently ALIA announced their new professional pathways. And I'll say we're not affiliated with ALIA, but I do encourage all of you to Google it and visit their website and see what they have to offer. I quite enjoy the 10-minute video on the page explaining this. And one of the goals that they identified there was to reconceptualize the LIS profession for the next decade, to increase diversity, focus on contemporary skills, and create a future-ready workforce. They also said that they have an ambitious 4-year timeline for the transformation of LIS education and professional pathways in Australia. So in that vein, they've introduced the CAT, or Certified ALIA Tech, and CLIP, Certified Library and Informational Professional, to encourage people without LIS qualifications into the profession. So one of the questions that occurred to us was, is education or experience more important to the future of the profession? And we acknowledge that's a ridiculously hard question. And I will say that some of our panelists today didn't really like the question, but engaged anyway because they're very keen to win the debate. So we wanted to explore the individual merits of experience and education separately to our profession. So we thought if we wanted to ask a ridiculously hard question, we better ask some ridiculously smart people to answer. So we welcome today two panels, a team comprised of people who will just defend the education is more important position, and another team who will defend the experience is more important position. So each team will open with a 5-minute statement, and then I will pass to the other team to rebut that. After two team members have spoken, I have a 5-minute recess so the teams can regroup and think about any issues that they want to address. And we'll come back and hear from the final team member, and then we'll open up to the audience for any questions. So I will say at the start too that these debaters have been asked to defend a specific position, and they don't necessarily agree with the view that they're advocating. They're just playing a role here in our debate. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Carl Smith.
Thank you, Craig. I really appreciate that. Now, before I begin at the start of Reconciliation Week, and as an Indigenous man myself, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands that we're gathering on today, in particular Wathaurong people where I'm presenting from. More than a word, reconciliation takes action, and it really is important. Now, the motion before us today is education or experience. What is more important to the future of the profession? Now, myself, Karen and Con will argue that education is indeed more important precisely because librarians and library technicians are professionals, and that a library qualification equips future librarians and library technicians with a deep understanding of the values, ethics, policies, and fundamentals of the library and information science profession. Now, at this event hosted by CAUL and attended by library staff right across the country, I'm very confident that most, if not all of us here today agree that we are professionals. Yeah, we understand how much hard work and dedication goes into the running of a library and then the library services that we provide. So things like understanding the comprehensive understanding of the collections and access, to teaching library users critical digital literacy skills, to ultimately ensuring the smooth daily operations of our services. Unfortunately, though, many of us have heard dismissive comments about our profession, born more out of a lack of understanding rather than derision. I can remember my brother once, he is a farmer, and he once said how easy it must be to be reading all day, stamping books in the peace and quiet, having a little dig at me, that sort of thing. I rolled my eyes and turned around to him and said, how easy it must be to have his sheepdog do all the hard work for him. He didn't like that. And it may seem quite silly to us, but for us working in libraries, these sorts of stereotypes, if left unchecked, can do a great deal of harm to our standing in society. The idea that we're of a bygone era and maybe usurped by technology or for us, absorbed into other departments. This is where a professional recognition underpinned by the extensive education, our education is crucial to developing new staff who have a deep appreciation for the values and ethics that underpin the information profession, while also demonstrating to the world the immense value that our specialised skills add to our users, our institutions, to research, the public record, and the community at large. We cannot underestimate the importance that our professional standing in the community and amongst other professions has, as it gives us a greater voice to demand improvements in library services, resources, and of course wages. According to the Grattan Institute, across the economy, a graduate with a bachelor's degree earns on average annually about $13,000 a year more than someone without an education, without higher education, I should say. The Australian Council of Professions defines a profession as a disciplined group of individuals who adhere to ethical standards and who hold themselves out as and are accepted by the public as possessing special knowledge and skills in a widely recognised body of learning derived from research, education, and training at a high level, and who are prepared to apply this knowledge and exercise these skills in the interests of others. Now, the library qualifications accredited and informed by ALIA on the advice of industry and its members are very carefully designed so graduates are adequately prepared for the necessary knowledge to enter the profession and begin their lifelong professional development journey. Current ALIA President, Viv Barton, suggests that library education empowers all individuals to understand, critically analyse, and make informed decisions and effectively participate in society. Now, we're not arguing that one's library education ends when they've got that test written in their hand. If that was the case, this debate would fall on deaf ears. Rather, we're arguing that undertaking a library qualification serves as a necessary foundation that develops the necessary knowledge and critical thinking skills required to adequately understand library structures as they are and have historically been, in order to make informed decisions about where libraries may move into the future. Now, I myself am an early career librarian. After selling pies at the MCG and making boiled lollies at Sovereign Hill, I was encouraged to look at libraries as a career path. And eventually I decided to complete my graduate diploma in information management online there. Now, after completing my professional placement at Federation, I very soon landed my current role as a library frontline services supervisor, and I absolutely love the job. Days like today where there's a snap lockdown can be quite difficult, but overall it's a very satisfying role. Now, I did have relevant external experience in customer service and staff supervision. However, looking back on my recent study, I can really appreciate how my qualification prepared me for my career in libraries. I learned how to work with classmates with different interests and experiences to complete group assignments and project management assessments, that sort of thing. I studied the theory behind advanced search strategies, cataloguing methods. We debated ethical issues around copyright and open access. And I gained an insight into the historical progressions of libraries and their many forms. As someone studying in order to work in an academic library, I really actually appreciated being exposed to a diverse range of views and opinions there as well, from people who had interests in public, school and special libraries, and had come from an assortment of other undergraduate and professional backgrounds as well. This exposure to various opinions and the wider library profession at an early stage in my career was invaluable to me, as it allowed me to broaden my understanding of how each library sector works with each other and the common skills we require in order to reach our shared goals. These skills can be learnt in some degree on the job, and indeed they must be built upon in the job itself, so they can be refined with workplace experience. However, I firmly believe that the time, the space and the careful guidance given to library and information science students in pursuing a qualification develops a greater depth of knowledge and, importantly, a shared understanding of the high standards the profession requires of us to adhere to in order to achieve our professional aims. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carl, for your opening statement. I'm now going to hand over to Olivia Larobina, who is going to defend team experience.
Thanks, Craig. Yes, I'm Olivia and I'm speaking first for team experience. I'm just going to start with a bit of an anecdote about my previous work employment. So before I started with Deakin, I was employed to write resumes and cover letters for job-seeking clients. I noticed a really common occurrence with a lot of my younger, recently graduated clients. So those who spent their time at university or TAFE solely focused on the studies without gaining substantial work experience were at a disadvantage when looking for employment. Even though they were applying for graduate entry-level roles, there was still an expectation that they would have tangible employment skills, and relevant work experience was always listed as a desirable bonus. I encouraged the clients to ask for feedback when they were called with the outcome of their interviews, and a really common rejection reasoning was that the employer went with someone who had more experience or better met the role criteria. If education is the most important quality, then why are so many recently educated applicants losing out to those with relevant experience? Before I delve further into my arguments, I'm going to just quickly break down the debate topic a little bit. Is education or experience more important in library staff? So there are two key components that we considered when drafting arguments. The first that we discussed was the term library staff, which Craig also expanded on in his introduction. Our thoughts are essentially the same. Library staff has a much broader scope than just librarians. It also includes library officers, library assistants, library technicians, and many other roles that don't actually begin with the word library. The second component is, what do we mean by education or experience? I'm not going to argue that education has no value whatsoever. We're librarians, how could I possibly say such a thing? However, I do think that we can argue that experience is of a higher importance, that LIS students should gain work experience before graduating from their course, and that library-specific education isn't necessary to be considered a librarian. When job seeking for library roles, you'd be hard pressed to find a position description that doesn't include a hefty amount of experience criteria, but you can find roles that don't require qualification. I browsed through many library jobs online and I discovered quite a few roles that didn't have specific training listed. A number of these were library officer positions. Others were roles within libraries that required specialised training. So there was programs officer, e-learning coordinator, literacy officer. And I also found some roles that specifically had that word librarian in the title. So there was a children's librarian ad which would accept applicants with significant experience in a different area. So one example was a kindergarten teacher, and there was a systems librarian position description that didn't list education at all. So a potentially successful applicant for one of those roles who would soon call themselves a librarian might not have ever completed any library-specific education. There are many people who currently fall under the librarian umbrella who haven't completed library qualifications. I know I personally work with many people in this category, and I'm sure many of you do too. Librarians with education in other areas shouldn't feel inadequate for learning on the job rather than in a course. They bring to our libraries unique perspectives, specialised talents, and diverse skills beyond what the average person thinks of when they hear the word librarian. In preparation for this debate, I also browsed through several library and information science courses at both TAFE and university levels. All the course descriptions list potential employment outcomes as working in libraries, as well as working in archives or records organisations, and some courses also include galleries and museums. This wide range of career outcomes shows that LIS courses aren't as direct as, say, a Master of Teaching is. And a new graduate without any work experience would still require on-the-job training in their new library or archives or records role. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that this is a negative attribute of those courses. I'm just demonstrating that professionally identifying as a librarian isn't tied to the point of graduation as it is for a lawyer or an accountant. Generally, a graduate wouldn't refer to themselves as a librarian until they actually started working in a library, because some graduates may never work in a library setting. For these reasons, a current LIS student who aspires to be a librarian would greatly benefit from becoming a library staff member during the course of their studies to better equip them to find employment once they graduate. Both paid and voluntary work would be beneficial, as it would allow them to apply their theory knowledge into real work situations and gain not only work experience, but relevant work references for their job applications. Education is important, but it isn't necessary to become a library staff member. And those who have learnt from years on the job shouldn't be overlooked or discounted. Overall, the most important quality for library staff is that they are knowledgeable in order to best serve our clients. And I would argue that experience creates this knowledge, not education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivia. I am now going to hand over to Karen Brown, who is going to rebut for team education.
Thank you. And thank you to Carl and Olivia for your insights and for speaking so thoughtfully. This debate isn't about absolutes and answers. It's about the variety of discussions we get to have at this exciting time in an amazing profession. I have only my own lived experience to rely on and my life-changing path through graduate school, and I'm an advocate for professional LIS education. The ALIA Professional Pathways Consultation Report clearly lays out some pertinent issues we are debating today. Some issues include the need for clear language around roles in the library for technicians and professionals, how to allow for a variety of pathways depending on individual circumstance, how we articulate our profession, and how formal education underpins all this. It helps to have direction, a path about what one needs to do with their experience to then achieve the applicable LIS qualification for their preferred job. In order to obtain the academic librarian jobs I desired in the US, I had no choice other than to get a master's degree. I saw it as an enormous opportunity for strategic, personal, and professional growth. I recently spoke to a friend in Western Australia who was going to get her LIS degree after 20 years of working in libraries. I asked her, why now? After expressing regret for not getting her degree sooner, she simply said, better career opportunities and better pay. In a world of competition that will only increase, a master's degree in LIS still sets you apart. People outside of libraries love to tell people in libraries what we do. After being baffled as to why a master's degree is needed for librarians, one learned blogger wrote this summary. Quote, in my view, for the responsibilities a librarian has, a bachelor's degree is sufficient. Many aspects of information seeking can be done on the job, and it hardly takes higher education to read books to children. As cataloging is being outsourced, it requires fewer librarians to organize materials by this method, and the use of the standard Library of Congress records overturns the need for making new records. End quote. I don't know about you, but the core critical library work that I and my team do was not even included in the sphere of this person's understanding of libraries. The insults and egregiously false narratives around our profession must be combated, and this can be achieved through our own support of the professional standards promoted by ALIA and through formal education. So please don't let this person win. Go get your LIS education and prove them wrong. Education is tough. It's time consuming and takes us away from our loved ones. It's expensive, and you want to be sure it prepares you for the next step in your life. And the education is not always good or inclusive or creative as it can be. One section in the Professional Pathways paper raises this concern. Quote, there's currently a disconnect between what is offered in LIS courses and what is needed for work-ready graduates. Courses need to be more responsive to workplace requirements and would benefit from stronger links with industry. A facilitated networked response to create an employer-relevant LIS professional framework would go a long way to ensure LIS courses remain credible, contemporary, and available into the future, end quote. There is a space where I believe we can make education more enticing, and Olivia touched on this. We currently have student placements where they get a taste of real world activities. We can take this one step further and have formal paid positions for LIS students to contribute to real work activities throughout their program. During my degree, I worked in a variety of student jobs that helped me narrow my interests. I worked in preservation, caring for flood damage maps, at the Smithsonian, learning from Indigenous voices and their practices in libraries and archives. I worked in reference and repositories. It's something to think about as we go through the professional pathways journey together. One avenue of education and continuous learning is in the research and thought leader space. We can and do contribute our powerful ideas in a variety of ways, both through traditional and non-traditional pathways. These spaces are not just for academics. Professional librarians, including school, public, academic, and specialized, as well as library technicians, have a range of journals, newspapers, forums, etc., that we can contribute our unique voices to. We can embed this research space into our daily work environments, and formal LIS education is the perfect springboard to get aspiring librarians connected to research not only locally and nationally, but globally. If we're not actively contributing our diverse voices, facilitating new ideas and innovations, and breaking the mold, someone else will, someone else is. I want to leave you with a challenge. Find an inspiring discussion in an LIS or Glamour journal or forum, and think about how you can contribute to that discussion, much like we're doing today. Will you write an article or present at VALA next year? Maybe simply a coffee and a chat with like-minded colleagues. Let the act of engaging in the discourse put you in a different mindset and transport you to a place of new possibilities and pathways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I will now hand over to Vanessa Crosby, who will talk from team experience point of view.
Thank you. I will start by apologizing for my lack of background, which really is a point in favor of experience over education, because even with the PhD, I couldn't figure that one out before I started today. Something to do with my computer. So apologies for that. You get this one. So I want to reframe this debate a little bit. We've heard a great deal about the importance of library education for specific people's careers, that it helps set them apart on their career journey. And I want to take a slightly different angle as I argue for team experience, and think about what is critical for the successful delivery of projects and services in a library. So not just about getting your foot in a door for a job, but how do we make our library successful in the organisations that we work for? We heard about some of the misconceptions and stereotypes around librarians and what they do. And I think we have all faced this, that we're just the people who read all day, the people with the big room of books. And I think this is where experience is absolutely critical to combat those stereotypes and make a very clear case for the organisations that we work within, that we have a great deal more to offer our institutions and to ensure that the projects we need to do are delivered. And this comes down to experience in the form of institutional knowledge. So what I see as absolutely critical to the work we do is experience on the ground, navigating an institutional landscape, knowing who the key players are, having built those networks with stakeholders. There really is no substitute for experience when it comes to this. There's no course that can help you understand how to negotiate with those different stakeholders, how to connect with the policies and the pressures that are driving their priorities, and then be able to link that to the work that a library does. And that's how you start to break down those misconceptions, is really being able to be very agile and respond to the changing needs of an institution and connect that to the kinds of work that a library does. So we're talking about not just an understanding of a user persona of a researcher or teaching staff or student, but the teaching staff, the researchers, the students within this organisation, and what they might gain from our projects, and conversely, which library projects are not suitable for a particular institution. We also heard about the importance of maintaining a discipline group and the importance of having people who are educated with a set of professional values and ethics, and who don't finish with their education but go on to lifelong learning within the profession. And I would say that, yes, that is very essential to the success of our staff. But things like a code of ethics and a commitment to lifelong learning, and ability to take an education and apply it to be an engaged citizen, we see these in peak industry statements from across all of the bodies that produce professions. And I think they're, for any graduate of any type of education, we do expect those graduate attributes. So I think there is room beyond people with a specific library degree, and they will emerge and come to our organisation with a similar set of values. It's not to say that that library degree isn't beneficial, but a mix of people will have those same sets of skills. And I think the final point is this sense of the rapidly changing demands of the library profession and what we need from our staff. So, and we have seen this reflected in library degrees, but it's very hard to keep up with the pace of change. I'm thinking particularly in artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, and library degrees have absolutely responded by adding in development in these areas. But when you're looking at bringing these capabilities into a library, it's so important to be able to bring people in outside, again, with the experience of working on real world projects, particularly when you're working in areas of data, big data, where there are real concerns about data privacy, data handling, how that data is used. It's really essential not just to have people who have come fresh out of a degree with a sort of basic understanding, but to transfer their experience and skills on real projects into a library setting, and to share some of the learnings with us at the same time as we build up staff in our libraries in these main areas. So I would just conclude that a team experiences position is really what's essential to the success of a library, not just to getting a foot in the door in your career. And in terms of delivering on projects and delivering for our clients, having a workforce with a diversity of experience. Yes, some people with a library education, but people from a really broad variety of backgrounds, and people who are able to operate within the institution and the environment is extremely important for the success of our institutions.
Okay, thank you very
I'll
much.
hand over.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. We are now going to give our two teams a 5-minute break for them to get together, have a huddle, and decide if there are any points that they would like to rebut when they come back. And we will look forward in 5 minutes to hearing from Con Wiebrands and Simon Huggo. So I encourage you all to put questions in chat, and we'll farewell our teams and see you in 5 minutes. Okie dokie, we are welcoming back our two teams. And I see we lost a few people. I'm wondering if I said the word breakout rooms and people might have scattered. Hopefully that was enjoyable for everyone. I'll thank Sarah Davidson for selecting that music and facilitating that part, especially for us. So I'm going to hand over now to Con Wiebrands, who is going to give us the final word, as it were, from Team Education until we open it up for audience questions. So without further ado, over to you, Con.
Thank you, Craig, and thanks everyone. Yeah, very interesting time so far. And I think in terms of team education, my two learned colleagues have made really good arguments for the importance and value of education to librarianship. I think education puts us all on an even playing field. It means we can be assured that librarians can be measured to particular standards that are developed and assured by education. Without the standards set by education, we can't expect that everyone has the same knowledge and skills. I know that this knowledge and skills are developed and refined and improved as we go along. But with that education from the beginning of our careers, we can start off at that same point. Speaking of the qualification, without those qualifications, we wouldn't have the same job mobility that we do at the minute. It would be a lot more difficult for someone without university library experience to get a job in a university library if we could not be assured that that person, as a library qualified person, does understand the basic knowledge that a librarian in a university has. And of course, I think CAUL made that point. We could not be assured of receiving certain levels of pay without that education. We would be at the mercy of employers, some of whom do have stereotypes about what library staff can bring, librarians can bring, and would say things like, well, you know, why do we need to pay you at a professional level when we've got the internet? So without that qualification, the knowledge that is conferred on us, the specialist skills that we gain through education that sets us apart from other professions, we would have a much harder time making the claim for the pay that we deserve. And I'm well aware at this point that some might argue we should be paid way more handsomely than we are, but that's definitely an argument for a different debate. My second point is that librarianship is a venerable profession. We've been around for a while, you know, for all its faults and problems, I would suggest that the history of librarianship should be taught and understood. And how would we do that? We would achieve this by education. We should constantly be striving to improve our profession and our practice as librarians, but we cannot do this in a vacuum without the knowledge of where we have come from. This history does add to the richness of our profession, and it shows us that, yes, we've come a long way and that we have a lot to improve. So we know that librarianship in Australia has strong links to, or is one manifestation of, the colonial academy, and has played a role in upholding repressive social structures in our society. And some might argue that it is precisely this education which continues to perpetuate sexist, elitist, racist attitudes. To quote the Black lesbian feminist poet Audre Lorde, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." Okay, that might be true, but I would argue that without education, without using the tools that education gives us to ensure that we remember and understand and use to combat and rebuild ourselves as a profession, we would be adrift. We would not have a strong foundation to anchor us in this very rapidly changing society. So we shouldn't throw education out because some of what it has inculcated in our profession is problematic. We need to harness the power that education brings to us as a profession and use it to continually rebuild librarianship. My final point is based on what Vanessa, the point Vanessa made about ethics and values. Vanessa made the point that all professions within a library, you have people from professions like IT, marketing, etc. All professions have some sort of code of conduct or ethical standards. And I think we all agree that that is correct. But we as team education take strong exception to that point, that the values of other professions are the same as the values of the library profession. The library profession has unique values that I think make us stronger. The values of equity, of making our services open to all in our community. That is a really unique proposition for our profession. And the values of making information available to all, preservation, that is not the case of all, IT does not think of preservation in the same way as librarianship does. So I'd argue that without education to inculcate, to build those professional ethics for us as librarians, as library staff, including library technicians in that, we would lose our standing in the academy, and that would be a very, very difficult proposition for all of us as library staff. Thank you. That's my argument.
Thank you very much, Con. Much appreciated. And now I will hand over to Simon for the final official word from Team Experience. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Connie. Thanks, everyone, for your debate today. I'd like to remind everyone that it's National Reconciliation Week, and I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people where I am at the moment. I think we've heard a lot from team education about what those qualifications are and why they're needed, what they cover. The fact that it provides us with a strong foundation and an even playing field, and covers certain standards. It's a very venerable, known profession. I can see the link between pay scales and having that strong foundation, but also that one around values and ethical standards. But being on team experience, my esteemed colleagues have made a very strong argument about, it's the experience that makes the difference for us. Olivia has reminded us that library students need to gain work experience before they graduate. This helps them move into that profession and to be able to get a job and be able to be on the right pathway. She's reminded us that a lot of job ads don't require specific library qualifications. It's an interesting one that's actually happening right now. And that, our role is to serve our clients and deliver on projects as best as possible. And Vanessa reminded us that institutional knowledge is really important, and it takes experience putting that knowledge into practice and making that work. And if we, I guess experience will combat those stereotypes about what a librarian is and what we have to offer. And that it's, and Vanessa also reminded us that it's hard to get librarians with new skills in new and different areas because the environment is changing so rapidly. And those areas around, for example, artificial intelligence or big data or programming or research data management, those kind of things. We really need people with that experience to come into our libraries and help deliver our services. And I think there's an important thing that ALIA are doing, are trying to reshape our course so that it involves more experience and brings in that experience, because that's where we're going to be relevant. So when I talk to people in our institution outside our library, I don't talk about shelving books, and I don't talk about cataloguing, and I don't talk about activating of collections and things. They're not really all that interested in that sort of stuff. But when I talk about research experience, or when I talk about customer experience, or I talk about managing and maintaining systems and having experience in those areas of user testing or implementation or project management. That's when people's faces kind of light up, because they can kind of see and understand all of the different areas that libraries do and that our staff have experience in that they can engage with. And that's when they can kind of see, okay, I see, this is where we need to use the library. We need to use the library staff because we have all of these resources at our feet and this experience that we have to be able to deliver. And libraries are really good at delivering. And so that experience is where, you know, that's absolutely critical to be able to explain what we do and how we do it and how we connect with our institutions. If we just talk about the kind of traditional librarian things, that's where people are going to switch off and they're not really going to see how that matters and how that relates to the institution. And I think in recruitment, Olivia reminded us of this as well, but when we look at recruiting staff, we really only look at people's qualifications once. We kind of look at it once and never look at it again. And really it's that experience and those aptitude, the attitude that people have, the experience they have from other areas that really enriches what we do and allows us to work really strongly and be able to do things. So we look for people in recruitment who can, you know, articulate what they do, that can talk clearly and confidently in a situation. They have a positive attitude towards change and collaboration and teamwork and can work together. And that, you know, you can often only get that through experience. And that's super important in this environment. It's what our customers want. It's what our external partners, our industry collaborators, our academics and our community members want. So the case is clear. What more can I say? You know, experience wins. I'm sorry, that's it. That's my argument, Craig. That's our argument.
Well, thank you very much, everyone who's contributed today. Very much appreciate that. I really actually appreciated the most that I asked you all to defend a position, and you all said to some extent or the other, look, the other side has something to say here, but really, this is where it's coming from. I'm going to open it up for questions now, so I hope that Sarah can spotlight our teams right now, and I can throw it open. I'm going to ask the first one. This person's actually put their name in the chat, which I love. This question comes from Tom Goodfellow, who asks, how much of your day-to-day work uses skills learned at college or university, and how much uses skills learned on the job? So, Karen, you're on my screen. I'll ask you that first.
Hello. Okay, I'll take a crack at that. So for me, my graduate degree was 3 years full time, so it's quite intensive in the US. So a lot of my day-to-day work is tied to my degree, of course, but not all of it. So let's say 50-50, you know, 50% of it is my own emotional intelligence, my working life before I became a librarian, which was in the university sector, but I was gaining just, you know, out of undergrad university, how the world works. So yeah, I think I often refer to the fundamentals that I learned in graduate school, and those the skills that got me my first real library job, that then got me further and further experience. So without my grad degree, I would not have gotten the jobs that then been able to build upon. So
fantastic, thank you.
50-50.
Okay, great. I might get a quick rebuttal from Vanessa. Would you like to comment about how much of your day-to-day work uses skills that you gained in your studies versus that came through experience?
I'd say the majority would be from experience. So I came via a fairly circuitous route from academia into libraries. My research background is in art history and religious studies, and my main link with libraries was working in just the GLAM sector more broadly. So working in archives as a researcher, working in museums as a curatorial assistant, and so on. So for the sort of day-to-day technical stuff, certainly most of it's been based on just working on the ground in universities and then in libraries. which is not to say that education doesn't come into it. And I think that's where that kind of diversity of educational backgrounds is really helpful. So obviously part of it is just bringing that discipline specific knowledge to the job is really important. And I think where I was surprised at as well is what I use most day to day is critical theory background in education and bringing that kind of critical perspective to analysis of data. And of course, just that research background as well. I mean, I do huge amounts of policy research, but it really is all of that. What's been more important is less the content and more the experience of doing a research project, the experience of having to very rapidly turn around grant applications and so on. I would say that's what I use day to day, much more than any formal education.
Thank you. We've got a question here around how important do you think library-related micro-credentials are now, or are they becoming? I might have to give that one to Con first. Con, do you have a comment about micro-credentials?
That's really hard, Craig. I think they're very important, but the problem we're going to have at the minute, and I'm just thinking about the work we've been doing at my organization, my institution, about how to fit micro-credentials within the framework of the current qualification, the way it's done in Australia. How do they fit in, and how do they get accredited? How do we make sure that you deliver the right quality, and that we're going to be just doing the right thing by our students by doing that, just making sure that they are as robust as the existing courses that we have are, the traditional ones. I think, however, that they would be really, really important. I can see there's one question on there that says, on the screen, in the Slido stream, that says, how can one qualification prepare you for your entire career? And I would tend to agree with that. If you're not constantly updating and learning, that's a problem. And I think micro-credentials, as they start to really take shape and become part of the accepted education portfolio for any professional, I think they could be really important to help people gain skills and knowledge in new areas, and prepare them for different roles and different responsibilities. So I don't think they're that important yet, but I can foresee a time when they might be.
Great, thank you. I'm going to award you bonus points for just jumping ahead and answering your own question. I love that. And now I'm going to throw one over to Simon, please, and say that the most popular question we have here is, without professional qualifications, what happens to our identity as professionals? So you're arguing from team experience. So what would happen if we didn't have professional qualifications?
Nothing at all. I think what I'm thinking is that people don't know what we are anyway. They don't understand that that identity. So we need to get over ourselves and just embrace what we do, which is a whole variety of things. And I think it's hard to be everything to everybody, but that's kind of what we do. So if you think, I think our identity is important to ourselves. I'm certainly very. I think that's a clear thing. And there is that community and that identity that comes with working in a library, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to have all the same qualifications. And I think there's really big value in having qualifications that are related, that can help you do your job, that you've gained elsewhere. So Vanessa talked about research with her PhD. So that's important in working with researchers and understanding what they do. But if you don't have a library qualification, that doesn't necessarily matter in that situation. You can learn about that, and you can work with librarians and work together to actually resolve issues and solve problems. So my view is that it's other people. We're the people who are worried about our identity. No one else cares.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. Now, I also want to ask some questions of Olivia and Carl, and unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I will squeeze one more in and say, Carl and Olivia, whoever would like to go first, can we promote lifelong learning without clear professional qualifications?
I would have to say, again, from team education's point of view, that having clear qualifications is absolutely fundamental to lifelong learning there. The fact that, you know, everyone's kind of agreed on the point that we need a quite wide variety of experiences to make the library, you know, work in an appropriate way to get the operational stuff off the ground. Lifelong learning can certainly mean, for those that are have undertaken a library qualification, that they might be able to take on other sort of lifelong learning qualifications, professional development opportunities after that. I've got quite a few colleagues that are studying an education degree or tertiary education and qualification in some sort of fashion there. I think we heard from, I think it was Philip Kent on Tuesday, saying he undertook an MBA to progress his career there as well too, and there are plenty of others who are looking at IT degrees, that sort of thing there as well too. So I completely understand that there are more qualifications, more sort of lifelong learning opportunities that we need to take as professionals. But as a team, we do firmly believe that the idea of a library qualification can be that foundation and that sort of shared understanding and ethics of what we're trying to achieve as a library, that the thought leaders in libraries should have a really good understanding of library ethics and values. And that's a great sort of foundation. And then we build that sort of additional experiences on top of that there as well. Or we bring it into the profession and then do the qualification.
Okay, thank you, Carl. And Olivia, any final thoughts on promoting lifelong learning without clear professional quals?
Very difficult question to answer when I'm on team experience. So I mean, I guess it's someone like I'm currently a student. I'm currently studying my master's, so I obviously very highly, you know, value receiving that professional qualification. And for a long time, I thought that I wouldn't identify as a librarian until I achieved that qualification. So, you know, once I got my graduate certificate, I still didn't think that I would count as a librarian yet. And then it took me about 6 months working in a library to realize, oh, I don't need to have my master's right now to feel like I'm a librarian. And I think as well, when I think of so many of my co-workers who, you know, not everyone has their masters, not everyone's able to gain their masters, but we're all constantly learning, we're all constantly adapting to all these new changes in the library. And I think it's just a very fluid place to work in that sense.
Yes, all right. We will unfortunately have to leave it there. We should have scheduled more time for this. This has absolutely exceeded all of my expectations. I would really like to thank all of our presenters, Carl, Karen, Con, Olivia, Vanessa, and Simon. Really appreciate the time and thoughtfulness that you put in today. It was really thought-provoking, and I'm sure I'll have a lot to think about going forward. I'd also like to thank everyone who asked questions and attended today, and the CRIG and PD committees for organizing the event, especially Marion Slauson from Fed Uni, Naomi Malumbi from the University of Melbourne, Fiona Russell from Deakin, who are all part of the planning group. The CRIG, PDIG, and CAUL are continuing the initiative started in 2020 and have arranged for native trees to be planted through the organization, 15 trees, as a thank you to all of our speakers. I know the speakers wanted to win the debate, and we will let everyone know who won when we conclude today. And finally, a reminder that our next CAUL event is the CRIG Forum, scheduled for 23 and 24 of June. So keep an eye out for the program and registration details. And thank you all very much, and I hope you have a lovely day.